One good thing I want to talk about before we end this is California has passed a bill into law. This is State Assembly Bill SB 58 passes. What does this do? This decriminalizes small amounts of psychedelic drugs. Some good news. Decriminalizes small amounts of psilocybin, psilocin, dimethyltryptamine, DMT, and mescaline. Mescaline is the active ingredient inside peyote. Although this law does not decriminalize peyote. There already is special handling laws. You're allowed to send peyote if you're a part of the Native American church and stuff like that. So this does not mess with any of that. That's still illegal in most respects. What this basically is decriminalizing is shrooms. Shrooms in so much, and if you get these things in chemical form. But that's what psilocybin is. It's shrooms. And this passed in California 42-11, and that's kind of amazing. I think that's awesome. I am all for drug decriminalization in any form that it takes, because I think that you should be allowed to do drugs if you want to. I think that's something that the government should have no say in. I don't think that there should be any laws for basically any drug, really. If you think about it, I mean, I would be up to maybe not legalizing, but decriminalizing pretty much anything. Now, when you say decriminalizing, what does that mean? That means if you get caught, you don't go to prison, right? But there may be fines, that kind of thing. And maybe if you get caught selling it illegally, you go to prison. I could stand behind that for some of the harder drugs, for things like crack, cocaine, heroin, meth. I could still be on board with putting illegal dealers in prison. But if you are on it, if you get caught under possession for personal use, I don't think you should have to suffer any consequences for that at all, right? I think the best thing we could do as a country in order to basically control these kinds of drug addictions is to decriminalize it and give addicts a reasonable way to obtain these drugs. That's what I think. I think we should treat it more like a medical issue. Whereas if you're a drug addict, then you can check yourself into a clinic if you so choose, and you can basically get off it for free. Else, if you don't want to get off it, then there should be legal ways for you to obtain these drugs through government programs of some sort. That way, you don't have to do anything like, I don't know, steal or something in order to obtain your drugs. That way you don't have like pimps and stuff exploiting people. You don't have drug dealers exploiting people, stuff like that. Keeping prostitutes addicted to drugs in order to like sexually exploit them, that kind of thing. You don't have people out there robbing and stealing in order to get money for drugs. I think that would solve a lot of these problems, and it would also do a lot to lessen the impact of drug cartels, because if it's legal, then you can obtain it from a dispensary. Then you don't have to go to drug cartels in order to get it. That's what we've seen happen with marijuana. It's used to be that, marijuana was imported from Mexico. I mean, it still is to some degree, but not so much anymore. So they've moved on to harder drugs, because that's actually what's going on, right? Where the hell is the fill? There it is. Fill. I want to fill that. But that's what they've done. The cartels have moved on to harder drugs because marijuana is no longer profitable. Because people are not going to street dealers in order to get weed anymore. Why do you have to if you can just go down to your local dispensary and get it legally and free and not have to deal with scumbags anymore, not have to be all sketchy about it? And sometimes it's even cheaper than it was, although I still think legal weed is way too expensive. It should be like half of what it is now. It's way too fucking expensive, right? But there's reasons for that we've covered in prior streams. You know, the fact that they have to do dealings in cash and police officers stealing their money, crap like that. We could talk about that a different time. I actually have a couple streams dealing with those types of issues, but still. So when I see a law like this that decriminalizes more drugs, it's like, good. That's what we should be doing, right? I noticed that LSD is not on this list. And I'm not so sure how I feel about that. So I have taken LSD more than once. Not too many times, though. I've done it a couple of times. And I can tell you that a lot of the hype and misconceptions that come with LSD are just that. They're just rumors and misconceptions, They make it sound like you're going to do it and then you're going to go jump off a bridge or something. That's not how it is. It's just a drug like anything else, right? So I notice LSD is still kind of considered too dangerous to be legalized here, and that's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I can understand that. But the rest of these, I think this is great. I think this is really great. I would like to show to you guys the actual law here. So let's go ahead and open this up. Let's put this over here. Let's turn on our window and make it bigger. This is legalinfo.legislature.ca.gov. SB 58, Controlled Substances, Decriminalization of Certain Hallucinogenic Substances. There's some good things here. We're not going to read through this entire thing, obviously, because it's like fucking 5,000 pages long or whatever. Existing law categorizes certain drugs and other substances as controlled substances and prohibits various actions related to those substances, including their manufacture, transportation, sale, possession, and ingestion. Right. That's good. This bill would, on and after January 1st, 2020, make it lawful for the possession, preparation, obtaining, or transportation of specified quantities of psilocybin, psilocin, dimethyltryptamine, and mescaline. I can't believe I pronounced all of those correctly. At least I think I did. For personal use as defined by and with persons 21 years of age or older, the bill would provide penalties for possession of these substances on school grounds, possession by or transferring to persons under 21 years of age. Perfectly acceptable for that. We have the same exact rule when it comes to alcohol and marijuana. I think they should lower this to 18. In fact, I think the drinking age should be 18. I can understand why they don't have the drinking age be 18, but I still think it should be. It should be, if you're a legal adult, if you can vote, if you can join the army, if you can go to prison for life, if you murder someone, you should be allowed to drink beer. If you're allowed to do all that other shit, if you're considered legally considered an adult, then there should not be anything that bars you from doing everything that adults are allowed to do. In real life, I do understand why they make it 21. It's because when you're 18, you're still a kid. But still, 3 years doesn't really make people that much more mature. Not in my opinion. I think the people who are going to drink when they're 18 are already drinking, right? The people who are going to abuse drugs when they're 18, it's not like they're going to be like, oh, I got to wait 3 years to do it. No, they're going to do it anyway. And it's really just a formality, is what I think. But I can understand why that'll never happen. I can understand why it's like, oh, you're 18 and you're boozing it every fucking night. And it's like, yeah, maybe you're slightly more responsible at 21, but in real life, no, not really. Anybody who's ever been to a frat party can tell you that's not how it actually works. But I digress. The bill would require California Health and Human Services Agency to convene a work group to study and make recommendations on the establishment of a framework governing the therapeutic use, including facilitated or supported use of those substances. This is why I think this is fantastic. Because if you just listen to what I just said, recommendations on the establishment of a framework governing the therapeutic use, including facilitated support use of those substances. That means that they're going to start regulating and funding actual therapeutic use of hallucinogens, psilocybin, mescaline, which is finally, because you hear story after story after story, how this helps people with dementia, how it helps people with depression, how it helps people with anxiety, and all of these things. And sometimes, you take, especially LSD too. And that's why I'm wondering why LSD isn't on this list. But things like psilocybin or whatever, they take it and it can change that's the thing, is that hallucinogens like this can change your personality. And there's been study after study after study after study about people who are like have anxiety, like severe social anxiety, like crushing social anxiety, where they just can't talk to people. They're so they have so much anxiety that they can't go outside, that they're scared to death of talking to people. And then they do psilocybin, for example. They do a regimen with a doctor. We'll give them psilocybin, and it loosens them up. And they're able to they have a revelation, and they're able to go and not socialize with people, but talk to people at least. They're able to go outside and be like, oh, well, fuck, because that's what hallucinogens do to you. They're very, if any of you have never done hallucinogens, they're very much a introspective kind of drug, right? Especially when it comes to DMT and psilocybin, the shit that you get from mushrooms. That's basically what you get from shrooms. Shrooms in my experience are a milder form of LSD. The high that you get is a milder high that you would get from LSD. That's in my experience. I know it's not the same with everybody. These things are different depending on who you are and what you take, right? And what specific drug you take and what quantities and stuff like that. It can have different effects for everybody. But in my experience, actual mushrooms, taking mushrooms, DMT, and all that, psilocybin, was a much milder form of the same thing that you would get from LSD. LSD would just be 10 times harder. And afterwards, it definitely, I can even mention in myself after, I was 18, so it's been a very long time since I've done any of this stuff. But I can tell you that there was a noticeable difference in my personality before and after. I became a lot more outgoing. I became a lot more sociable, a lot less the hung up over stupid shit. As a young man, I had a lot of anxiety about a lot of things. And I can tell you that these kinds of drugs were actually, they weren't the cure for it. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I took LSD and then it changed me completely and I had a spiritual... No. It didn't do anything like that at all. But they were a step towards getting over some of that shit. Getting rid of some of these hang-ups that I had. I can tell you that for sure. And this is just my personal experience. That's the personal antidote, right? But I know that there's actual scientific studies that have been going on for years and years and years, where they give these types of drugs to, like I said, people with dementia patients, people with crippling anxiety, people with severe depression, right? That kind of thing. And it can help them. So I'm glad to see this. I'm glad to see good. They're going to start paying for it. It won't just be one-off university study or whatever. It's going to no, there's going to be an actual framework, a program that's going to provide money for them to get this kind of research that they should have been doing on a wider scale for decades, in my opinion. Let's see. Then there's also a section where they're going to stop busting people for drug paraphernalia. Because that's another thing. Although cops rarely ever do that for you nowadays, because it's a ticket. They'll give you a ticket if they catch you with a pipe or something. Now it's finally that shit's legal, so you don't have to worry about that. Can't tell you about how many stories I've personally experienced myself where a cop has made me smash a pipe or something. Looks like that shit's gone, right? And then here's a couple of reasons why they want to do it. Right. Down here, people of the state of California do enact as follows. For over 50 years, the war on drugs has caused overwhelming financial and societal costs. The current United States drug control scheme does not reflect a modern understanding of the incentive, economics, and impacts of substance abuse, nor does it accurately reflect the risks of potential therapeutic benefits of many personally illicit substances. 100% based right there. Absolutely true. Drug prohibition has failed to deter drug use. That's true. It has increased its danger. Criminalization of drug use has created an underground market in which difficult to verify dosages and the presence of adulterants increase the risk of illicit drugs. That is true too. Why do you think people OD on shit so much? It's because half the time the crap you get from a fucking drug dealer isn't even the shit that you're buying. You know, they cut it with weird crap in order to stretch it out for it. Because the one thing you got to remember about drug dealers and stuff is that they're there to make money. That's ultimately what it's all about, right? So they'll sell shit to you that isn't even the shit that you're like trying to buy. They'll give you crappy stuff, like you don't know the quality of it. You hear these stories about how you'll have opiates like heroin and shit, and how they're cutting it with stuff or whatever. And it's like, you know, it's causing people's fucking arms to fall off, that kind of thing. If you legalize it, then you know the stuff that you're giving to people is pure. You know that it's not cut with fucking dried up gasoline or something, right? That it's not going to make like Crotakill or whatever. It's not going to make your flesh fall off if you like take it. That kind of thing. Like legalization is like, I see zero problems. Like I can't understand how anybody can find any fault with it. You win all the way around. Like the only reason why you wouldn't want to do it is if you were making money from like the prison industrial complex. Lack of honest evidence-based education has paved the way for decades of stigma and misinformation, which has contributed to increasing dangers of drug use. Not seeing anything I can disagree with here so far. Encouraging access to harm reduction tools like fentanyl test strips, drug checking kits, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry machines, and milligram scales increases public health and safety by allowing users to make more accurate decisions about their personal use. Yes. 100%. If we had these things, if people knew what they were getting was good, if you were able to control their dosage, then guess what? You won't have ODs, right? You know, when they say like, they make it sound like, oh, there's people are ODing on this or that, whatever, blah blah blah. What do they make it sound like, right? What are they trying to tell you? They always try to make it sound like, oh, well, this was some kind of crazed, deranged criminal who was shooting up so much shit that they couldn't get enough from just a normal high anymore, and they had to keep shooting up more and more and more, and then they OD'd on it. They shot up too much. It was their own personal failing. And now they're dead and they deserved it, right? That's what the conservative establishment will tell you. That's the narrative when it comes to drug overdoses. They deserved it because they were crazy. They were a crazy, deranged drug addict and they couldn't even control their own fucking intake anymore, right? When in real life, it's because of shit like this, right? This is what, half the time when people OD, it's because the shit they're getting, they're not even like getting the right drug that they want. It's cut with something fucking weird. And they're not getting the right dosage because they're high or whatever and they fuck up the dosage and they accidentally shoot up too much or something like that. That's what this shit happens most of the time. And the thing is, the police know this. The EMTs and stuff who respond to people overdosing on drugs, they know this too, right? And it's one of those things that everybody knows this is what the problem is, but the only people who can do something about it are politicians. The politicians drag their feet on it because it's like a personal football for them. The Republicans can use it to raise money for their criminal friends and the prison industrial complex that make money at locking people up. And the Democrats are too chicken shit to take a goddamn stand. I mean, you got to remember, neither party is a monolith. There are conservative Democrats as well. And it's like they're just as bad as the Republicans sometimes. So it's like the war on drugs has been a thing that people have been exploiting to make money from for 40 years now. So that's why it's so fucking hard to stop this shit. Because it's personally enriching people at the top. And they don't want the gravy train to stop. So this is why it makes me feel so good to see shit like this, to see that we're actually taking steps to end the stupid fucking drug war, right? Don't really need to read that much, more of this. Long story short, this goes on to detail all the rest of it and blah, blah, blah. And, these are the ones that are going to be like still outlawed and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. I'm glad to see some good news, because we always get so much bad fucking news every week, every day almost. There's always another story about another hurricane, another fucking flood, another corrupt ass politician out there using their position to fucking like just make money and screw everybody else. Another asshole fucking CEO complaining about how workers are lazy, blah, blah, blah. It seems like you only get bad news. And I wanted to show this one to you guys because there's some good news out there. Things can happen. And the way things happen is that you have to work for it. This thing right here just didn't happen overnight. And it didn't come from a politician, right? Gavin Newsom didn't get up there and say, I'm going to legalize hallucinogens. No, he didn't do that. He signed it into law, right? But he didn't make this happen. Okay? No one politician made this happen. The people made this happen through years and years of activism. And, the drug war is a thing that we've been getting a lot of victories with over the last couple of years. And there's no reason why it needs to stop with that. It's not just the drug war. I mean, this can be right here a UBI. This can be global climate change. This can be job training programs, right? This can be money for homeless people. It's all possible. Change can happen through the system and despite the system. It can happen. And the way that it has to happen is that you have to get involved. Yeah, okay, go out, protest, do direct actions, blah, 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 right? But if you want to see this shit happen, you got to get out there, you got to vote, right? The reason why marijuana is legal now in 36 states to some degree, recreationally legal in 18 states in this country, and, legal for medical reasons in 36. The reason why that happened is because people voted. It just didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen because of a benevolent governor or something. No, people got out there, they worked for it, right? They voted in every fucking election, and they voted out the people who weren't giving them what they wanted. And that's how it works. So do you want to stop? Do you want to solve some things? As we just spent the last hour demonstrating, the politicians don't have shit. They don't have solutions, especially when you're, conservatives, right? The conservatives are actively standing in the way of solutions. They're keeping this country dysfunctional because that's how they retain their power and their money. They want the government to be fucked up. They want not just the government, but they want the country to be fucked up, because then people will be in fear and then they'll vote for conservatives, right? If you want to end that, if you want our country to actually work for a change, and not just work, but work for you, and if you want if you want justice when it comes to the police, if you want people to actually, the government to help fucking people instead of fuck them up, like they should be doing, they should be helping people, like how they do in Northern Europe, for crying out loud, right? If you're homeless in Northern Europe, you can go to the government. You can get housing. You can get job training. If you're a drug addict, you can go and you can get help, right? If you are too poor to go to college, you can go and they will help you. You can get a higher education in these countries. If you want that here, right? If you want the same shit that they have there, where you don't have to worry about ending up homeless if you have like cancer, for example. That shit doesn't happen in Europe, in France, in England, in Norway. That happens here. Somebody gets a tumor and they end up losing everything because of fucking like medical bills are so fucking expensive, and then they can't work and they end up homeless. That shit happens all the time in the United States. That doesn't happen in other countries. Why? Because they're organized. Because their governments work for them. Their governments provide for the general welfare. Their governments actually help them when they need help. Ours doesn't do that. If you want that to happen here, this is how you make it happen. So, makes me happy to see that we're actually winning for a fucking change, right? Maybe we can, I don't know, win in some other areas too. Make it happen, folks.
Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.